So, social engineering is the area when you get the closest to the real people who work for your client. Yeah, so this implies some physical security considerations, of course, and this implies some um, ethical boundaries we have to stay within in order not to harm certain individuals and the company as a whole. Okay, so first I want you to remember all the time you are performing this kind of assessments is that your main goal is not showing that people are silly. Yeah, so showing that the person clicked a link and pointing out at that person and blaming them on their stupidity is not what your client expects from you. You have to highlight the results of the processes or the lack of the processes, yeah, the absence of training or organizational controls or awareness program or whatever path has been chosen by the client to prevent social engineering threats. So focus more on processes, not people. Even more, from my experience, good penetration testers always try to obfuscate, to obscure the actual individuals that have been used as paths to successfully attack the infrastructure. So some even surprisingly to some clients put this clause of demand of not firing people who figuratively click the link, yeah, after the penetration test. So from one point, this is highly ethical. Okay, so putting a person under the pressure just because you were skillful enough to trick them to do something is not ethical, of course. And the second thing is that on a longer run, the people who have suffered from the attacks become actually the most valuable assets to the client, yeah, in this regard. So they know that now. They know where they were mistaken, where they were tricked, basically, yeah. So they have learned from the incident, and you cannot do better, you know. So learning from experience is the best way of obtaining procedural memory. So you can try to make people imagine those situations, and this is always less effective, but still more effective than just sending them a newsletter once a month, yeah, and pretending that is your security awareness program. But going to training, yeah, it's strong, but going through an incident is an extreme version of training, yeah. So it's like real world battle you are going through, and after that, that person, that target, will spread this knowledge throughout the company. Believe me, they won't limit that to themselves. They will tell everyone they know, and they will spread it even further in a manner. You see, this is possible. Even I was tricked to do that, to open that attachment or click that link or go by this link and then enter my login and password into the page. Yeah, so this is a highly positive side of the penetration test in terms of increasing personnel awareness about those threats. Second thing I want to point your attention at is that there are certain things that are out of scope. Okay, so as the same way there are some ethical boundaries to psychological experimentation. Yeah, so for example, psychologists could not put a subject at a situation when the subject could hurt themselves or hurt someone else. Yeah. So there are certain considerations about ethical conduct on the social engineering pen test. So lying is not in this list because it's still questionable whether we could or could not lie all the time on the penetration test through social channels. But certainly do no harm to individuals. Focus on the company. So if we are talking about attacking people, we are attacking them in a business context. Yeah, so breaking into someone's Facebook account is really private. It's most probably out of scope in most jurisdictions. Yeah, so it's something really private pertaining to an individual, not the company who hired you. So always think about that. Even limiting access to the sites you clone and the sites you prepare beforehand before the social engineering engagement starts. Yeah. Limiting access to the IP addresses of business use, to the IP addresses that are used by offices and VPN gateways, yeah, to connect to internet, is sometimes advised. Okay. Certainly, do no threatening, because that's going beyond social engineering, really. Okay, so physical threat or moral threat or threat to a significant other or children or close relatives, friends, whatever, is aimed at something way below the level social engineering plays at. Okay, so it's like going really deep to our nature, and this is absolutely out of scope of organizational structure and organizational processes, and something a person could learn from a training or an incident. Okay, so this is physical or mental threat that triggers natural response, and this is totally unacceptable on an engagement. And overall, do no evil. So remember, you are there to cause good, not bad consequences. Okay, so there is no sparing a particular interests of an individual for the greater good in these situations. Okay, so you should not harm anyone and do no evil. So once you see yourself as a potential source of any type of negative effect, you have to stop right there. You should not take that path, even if you think that on a larger scale you will cause some positive change. That's just not acceptable. You should think about other ways to get there. Okay, and then for your own safety, always have engagement letter before starting any activities, of course. Yeah, so just for legal reasons, you have to have an authorization from your client at all times. But especially when you are going in, when you are on site on the client's premises, remember that in case you are caught and identified as a potentially malicious threat agent, you will have to present something. So always have a copy or a second original copy of an engagement letter with you on site. That's a must. You don't have to try your luck to the extent that you find yourself somewhere waiting for police officers to figure out your fate. Yeah, so that's not a good thing. You will have to present something to security guys or to some others. You will fail an engagement most probably, but this is a positive result as well. So something went absolutely right. Yeah, so not wrong but right. So something triggered the expected response. So positive result on penetration test is also a result. You have to highlight that in the report, that something caught you and you were prevented from successfully mounting the attack, but this is a result as well. Intrusion in certain jurisdictions is strictly forbidden. Okay, so no matter what your client writes down into the engagement letter, this could be just not permitted by law. So I could not encourage you more to just go and consult your lawyer whether in a specific jurisdiction, when your client wants to consume your consulting services, it is theoretically allowed to attempt intrusion to a private or corporate property by the owner's consent. So this is really important, even especially in the countries with the code law, not British type of law, but the codes that explicitly contain all the rules. That might be the case, and the majority of the countries out there are like this. Okay, about lockpicking. We didn't touch this throughout the video, but just to mention that, first of all, this is really interesting as a sport. So picking locks is really similar to all other offensive security activities. So if you have time and if you can get a hold of a set of lockpicks and some training locks, do that. This is really cool. This is really zen. Sitting and picking locks and trying to compete with someone else. That's really interesting, and it trains your non-technical skills as well. So just putting effort, time, and concentrating on a task, that's really useful in the career. But again, lockpicking is really old, and locksmiths were really strong in lobbying certain rules. So in some jurisdictions it could be also just explicitly forbidden. Also all the time you will have some physical channels for attack, and you will be asked to use lockpicking skills. Consult your lawyers first and see what they say about whether it's theoretically possible to do on client's consent on the client's premises.